All right, what's up? Good morning. So today we are going to read chapter 2 from Ruth, and that's that. Period. Period. All right. So Ruth chapter 2. Um, as a reminder, see if I can remember. So Ruth chapter 1, we pretty much me trying to figure out what's not right. So in Ruth chapter 1, um, Naomi and her two daughter-in-laws, Orpah and Ruth, and then her husband, I don't know if they ever gave his name, and her sons, Milan and Kilian. And I'm repeating this to remind myself of like what happened and also kind of test my memory a little bit. They were from Judah. I think the harvest was bad, so they went to Bethlehem. No, sorry, they were from Bethlehem and Judah. I think the harvest wasn't good at that time, so they went to Moab, which is where the two girls were from. Ruth and Orpah were from Moab. They were Moabites. Um, at some point, no, Naomi's two sons and her husband passed away. I don't remember if it was on the way there. Um, when did they pass away? I mean, Elimelech was the husband's name. Okay, so I guess they died while they were in Bethlehem, is what it says. Okay, so they were there for like 10 or 12 years or something over there in Bethlehem, and then Emelach and Milan and Kilian passed away. So then they went back to Bethlehem and Judah because they heard that the famine was, had passed and that the harvest was up. So Naomi's explaining to Ruth and Orpah how she's older and pretty much really can't do anything for them, like with their age and then her age. Even if she had kids, they pretty much wouldn't be able to even marry her sons moving forward. So she pretty much tells them that, hey, you guys can go, you're young enough to like find new husbands, start your life over, leave me. Long story short, Orpah goes back to her homeland and Moab, I believe, and then Ruth, she stays with Naomi. Okay, Ruth tells Naomi, um she says, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Okay? So, chapter 2. Hit away go. So, the subtitle for this, let me make sure I can see my notes and stuff. Okay, amazing. Is Ruth gleans in Boaz's field. Okay? And gleaning meant to I think it was like the way of harvesting. Plenty of leftover grain was in the field, so this grain could be collected. Yeah, glean means to collect, okay? So Ruth gleans and Boaz's field, so I guess she's collecting the harvest. Here we go, chapter 2. Now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. One day, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who was kind enough to let me do it. Naomi replied, all right, my daughter, go ahead. So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters. And as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech. Okay? And the importance that Boaz is related to Elimelech is that we learned in chapter 1 that when someone becomes a widow, the next man in line, the husband's brother, immediate brother, is supposed to like take care of that female that is now widowed. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you," he said. "The Lord bless you," the harvesters replied. Then Boaz asked his foreman, "Who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" And the foreman replied, "She's the young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She has been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes rest in the shelter." I'm sorry. Excuse me. Boaz went over and said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young women working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting, and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly, and when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well." Okay? Wonder why he calls her my daughter, though, but I guess that's a polite term or something. That's what we're going to go with. Okay. So let's see what notes. This goes up to 12. Okay, so we'll read up to 12 real quick. Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. "What have I done to deserve such kindness?" she asked. "I am only a foreigner." "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother in your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." Okay, so here's some of the notes. When the wheat and barley were ready to be harvested, harvesters were hired to cut down the stalks and tie them into bundles. Oh, I don't have no questions today? I guess not. Let me go back real quick because I'm supposed to be studying and I'm not writing any stuff down. Okay, who was Boaz? Because the study notes are important. What is going on? Boaz is a relative of Naomi's husband. So it doesn't really say what type of relative. A relative of, I'm going to put Elimelech. So when I look this over, I can actually have a name and it'll force me to remember who Elimelech was. Okay. What else? So Ruth says, "Let me go out to the harvest field to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who was kind enough to let me do it." I remember reading in the other chapter that during this time, the harvest was so plentiful that there was so much extra grain left over. So that's why she was able to do that. And whatever was left, people would, you could gather and then you could use to make food. Okay. She's a young woman from Moab who came with Naomi. I'll just put this in my notes. Boaz returns and is questioning who this new lady is in his field, Ruth. Okay. Okay. So Boaz allows Ruth to work in the fields and has warned any other males to let her be pretty much not harass her, what sounds like. So she must have been very beautiful. Where is about the which part of the field of harvesting? Then Pharaoh have warned the young men not to treat roughly. When you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well. Okay. Allows her access to water when needed, which is important, I guess, because does everybody not have the same access? Or maybe he was just letting her know that, like, if you're thirsty, help yourself. Okay, back to the notes. Okay. All right. So, God's law necessitated that the corners of the fields not be harvested. In addition, any grain that was dropped was to be left for widows, orphans, foreigners, and the poor who would gather it and use it for food. Oh, wow. So now I'm finding out, or we're finding out, that the leftovers are specifically for widows, orphans, foreigners, and the poor. I'm going to make that note. Excuse my yawning. Leftover harvest was for widows, orphans, foreigners. Is leftover in one word, I'm assuming? Oh, wait. How do you spell foreigners? Okay. Oh, and poor. The purpose of this law was to feed the poor and to prevent the landowners from hoarding. This law taught the people of Israel how to care for the marginalized in their midst, as God had cared for all of them when they were slaves in Egypt. Okay. Because Ruth was a widow and a foreigner with no means of providing for herself, she went into the fields to glean the grain. Ruth made her home in a foreign land. Instead of depending on Naomi or waiting for good fortune to happen, she took initiative. She went to work. She was not afraid of admitting what she needed for working hard to get it. She was not afraid of admitting what she needed or working hard to get it. When Ruth went out to the fields, God provided for her. If you are waiting for God to provide, consider this. He may be waiting for you to humbly take the first step, trusting him to lead from there. How can you take action in your circumstances with a faith-filled and trusting heart? If you are waiting for God to provide, consider this. He may be waiting for you to humbly take the first step. We'll make that as a note. That's pretty much like saying faith without acts is dead. Like, you can have as much faith as you want, but if you're not putting in any type of work or any type of effort to show the Lord that, like, you're serious and this is something that you want, you know, the outcome is only going to be but so much. God provided for her. Okay. So waiting for God to provide. Waiting for God to provide? Question mark. Humbly take the first step. Awesome. Okay. How can you take action in your circumstances with a faith-filled and trusting heart? Ruth's task, though menial, tiring, and perhaps degrading, was done faithfully. I'm going to put that, I think that's the note. Ruth was faithful in her tasks, even though they were not the best. What is your attitude when the task you have been given feels below your station? So let me repeat that. What is your attitude when the task you have been given is below your station? The task at hand may be all you can do, or it may be the work God wants you to do. Or, as in Ruth's case, it may be a test of your character that will open new doors of opportunity. I'm going to read that one more time. What is your attitude when the task you have been given feels below your station? The task at hand may be all you can do, or it may be the work God wants you to do. Or, as in Ruth's case, it may be a test of your character that will open new doors of opportunities. So, this is something that I had to learn, also myself, is that like sometimes you're working jobs that you don't really want to work or don't really want to be at. Maybe you're applying for new jobs and you're kind of wondering like, why haven't I gotten anything yet? Why hasn't anything new came through? Like I'm ready to leave this situation. I feel like I'm not growing in it, or managers having issues with managers, coworkers, any reason. I learned that sometimes you stay in the situations that you're in because there's still lessons for you to learn, or the things that you're doing at this job are preparing you for what's next in your future, or for the next job that you are going to have, or the next task, regardless of what it is. Doesn't even have to be a job, but there's something that's coming in the future that God is preparing you for, pretty much, period. Okay. Ruth took the initiative to provide for herself and Naomi, even though the situation could have been dangerous. There are times when tough work with little rest is our only option, and that's very true. Boaz noticed Ruth's tenacity. In fact, he was so impressed with Ruth that he let her follow directly behind his harvesters in order to pick up the choicest grain that they dropped. So Ruth was so faithful in her work that Boaz let her literally travel directly behind his original workers so that she could collect any grains that fell as soon as they fell, to ensure that she had what she needed for her and Naomi. That alone was a blessing. Now, I don't know if the people that are allowed to, take the leftovers, if they do it at a certain time, and does that make it, kind of important that Ruth was able to follow directly behind, or were all of them allowed to kind of gather around but stay back and collect this stuff? Or, like I said, were they able to collect it at a certain time, like when the fields were done being worked on? Is this when they went, the poor and the widowed, the orphaned, and the foreigners, did they have to wait till the field was done for the day to go and collect anything? Good question. Let me ask that. When were people allowed to glean the field? Question mark. I don't know if I'll find the answer. Okay. Ruth probably chose this field to gather grain randomly, but God knew exactly which field would lead her to cross paths with Boaz. Put her right in the path. And Ruth had to do her part as well. Had she considered herself too proud or embarrassed to work in the fields, accepting the charity of someone else, she would have missed the opportunity to meet Boaz, which would change her life and give her the honor of becoming the ancestor of a king and the Messiah. So all because Ruth did what she had to do to provide for her and Naomi, she randomly chose a certain field that put her in the path to meet the gentleman that she was supposed to meet, that ultimately changed her life for the better in general, period. Changed her life, period. Ruth's life exhibited admirable qualities. She was hardworking, loving, kind, faithful, and brave. Let's put that in the notes. Qualities of Ruth: loving, hardworking, kind, and brave. These qualities gained for her a good reputation because she displayed them consistently in all areas of her life. Her past actions were a report card by which others judged her. Ooh, I like that. I don't like the periods. I don't know why. Your past actions can be seen as a report card to your life. Although we're not supposed to judge, we can and we need to believe. Sorry, although we're not supposed to judge, believe that people like have changed and can do better with their lives. It is true that, you know, what we do with our past and our qualities and things that people see about us will, you know, for the most part, take into account what people think about you, especially from that initial initial meetup, that initial, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm literally having a brain fart. Oh my goodness, what am I trying to say? Impression. Sorry. Sometimes when people have like an initial impression with you, they'll take what they take from that initial impression. But then if they decide to look more into your past or things like that, you know, they can use that information to maybe decide whatever they want to decide about your character and who you are now. We maybe like kind of shouldn't really do that because we're not supposed to be judging, and should give people a chance to show that either they are someone different or not, but that's here nor there. Okay, that's not what we're talking about right now. Ruth's reputation was one of her most valuable assets. Let's make sure our live's still going good. Okay, good, because I'm typing on this screen. So Ruth's reputation was one of her most valuable assets. Our reputations are formed by our actions, and particularly by how we treat other people. Pretty much what I was just saying. Those who watch you at work, in public, at home, and at church will notice the nature of your true character. Good character comes by consistently living out the truth God reveals in his word, no matter who you are with or where we are. Let's add a slide. I think it's this one. Chapter 2. All right. What am I writing? Good character comes from consistently living out good character comes by consistently living out the truth God reveals in his word. The truth. I think I need to blow my nose. The truth God reveals in his word capitalized? Yeah, in his word. Okay. No matter who we are with or where we are, as your character goes, so goes your reputation for being a person of trust, of truth, and of commitment to honor God in all you do. As your character goes, so does your reputation. I kind of like that. I'm going to add that here. As your character goes, so does your reputation. What? What's happening? Oh, that's how you do it? Never mind. It didn't do what I thought. All right. Continue on. Back to reading from the scripture, not the notes. I hope I continue to please you, sir, she replied. This is Ruth speaking to Boaz. We'll start real quick. So, Boaz is speaking. But I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done. I hope I continue to please you, sir, she replied. You have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I am not one of your workers. At mealtime, Boaz called to her, come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in the sour wine. So she sat with his harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. So Boaz allows Ruth to eat alongside all the workers. Well, I'll just say the workers because I don't know. Alongside the workers. Oops. Side the workers. Okay. So now here's my question. That's not what I want. Chapter 2. If she's eating among all the workers, does she now have the grains that she picked leftover from the field, and she's eating with him and having leftovers, so she has like double portion now? Or I mean, I feel like there's not really a or, because the scriptures literally stating that she's following behind them and she's picking up the extra. So she's following behind them, she's picking up the extra, and now she's also allowed to eat with them and has leftovers of food that I guess has already been cooked. So she has leftover grain to create food for herself, and she has been invited to eat at the table with everyone else and still take place in meals that are already cooked. Does Ruth have leftovers from the field? Even though she is eating with the harvesters? Question mark. Double portion? Question mark. Oh, I think I figured it out. Yes. So I go over, and then if I want it to be normal, yes. Okay. Thank you. Goodness, because I was getting my nerves. All right, where we at? She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. When Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered his young men, let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her, and pull out some heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up and don't give her a hard time. So, wow. Now it's the next day. Now it's the next day, or just another point in time when she's working, and Boaz has now allowed her to, I don't really know what this means though, let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her. What are sheaves? Oh, I don't have my other phone. I don't know what sheaves are. But anyways, the point is, now he's allowing her to gather from directly underneath the sheaves, and he's telling these people to specifically now leave, heads of barley up from the bundles so she can purposely pick them up. And wow, it just seems like blessing after blessing after blessing. Like he's making sure, as in he hasn't got, is making sure that she has exactly what she needs for her and Naomi to survive, with her doing nothing but being true to herself. And that's what makes it even more amazing. Okay. Um, so Ruth gathered barley there all day, and when she beat out the grain that evening, it filled an entire basket. She carried it back into town and showed it to her mother-in-law. Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over from her meal. Okay, so there's the answer. She did have double portion. Where did you gather all this grain today? Naomi asked. Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you. So Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man in whose field she had worked. She said, the man I worked with today is named Boaz. Oh, and Ruth went back to work again. So now I'm confused. When she went back to work, was it an additional day? At mealtime? Oh, maybe mealtime was lunchtime. So she was following behind the female workers. Then they had lunch, it seems. And then when she went back to the fields, Boaz told the men now to let her work right up under you and drop the heads of the barley. I hope everything's good. Just turn my phone vibrating. I'm good. Yeah. And drop the heads of the barley. So now she's getting the full things of barley, I'm assuming, and not like the little pickings. So that's why when she was done and she did whatever she did with the full heads, it was now an entire basket instead of just picking up little grains off the ground. Okay. She carried it back to town and showed it to her mother-in-law. Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over from her meal. And I'm only assuming that it's the same day because it says right here that Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over from her meal. So I'm assuming that it was more of a lunch meal and not a dinner meal if she had it with her still throughout the day. Because there's no way that they ate that for dinner and then she went home. And then went back to the fields because Naomi would already have the roasted grain. Don't know if that's right, but that's how my mind is processing it. Okay. So Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man in whose field she had worked. She said, the man I worked with today is named Boaz. May the Lord bless him, Naomi told her daughter-in-law. He is showing his kindness to us as well as to your dead husband. That man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers. Oh, that also makes sense. I don't know why that didn't click until now, even though I know I said something of it. So perhaps it's also that Boaz is treating Ruth with so much respect because of the situation with the widows. He knows that he is in some type of familial situation with Ruth, so he's taking the initiative to play his part and ensure that the widows slash, well, I can't say foreigners in this situation, but the widow of someone in his family is receiving the nurture and the care that by law they should be receiving. Oh, okay. Then Ruth said, what's more, Boaz even told me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest is complete. So she pretty much has food for the ongoing season. Good, Naomi exclaimed. Do as he said, my daughter. Stay with his young woman right through the whole harvest. You might be harassed in other fields, but you be safe with him. So Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's fields and gathered the grain with them until the end of the barley harvest. Then she continued working with them through the wheat harvest in early summer. And all the while, she lived with her mother-in-law. Wow. So not only was she invited to stay during the barley harvest, she probably did such an amazing job and won so much favor through Boaz just for what she was doing for Naomi that now she has been able to stay through the wheat harvest and pretty much has a continuation of a job and is able to continue providing for her and Naomi. Amazing. Okay. So that's the end of chapter 2. So I will read this little section right here real quick. And then next time, we'll move on to chapter 3. How long is chapter 3? Oh, it's not even too long. I could do that now, but I'm not. One chapter at a time. Okay? So, Ruth and Naomi says, the stories of several people. In the Bible are woven Oh, sorry. That was the beginning of the sentence. The stories of several people in the Bible are woven together so closely that they are almost inseparable. We know more about their relationship than we know about them as individuals. And in an age that worships individualism, their stories become helpful models of good relationships. Naomi and Ruth are a beautiful example of this blending of lives. Their cultures, family backgrounds, and ages, please forgive me, I'm so sorry. Their cultures, family backgrounds, and ages were very different. As mother in law and daughter in law, they probably had as many opportunities for tension as for tenderness, yet they were bound to each other. Naomi and Ruth shared deep sorrow, great affection for each other, and an overriding commitment to the God of Israel. And yet, as much as they depended on each other, they also gave each other freedom in their commitment to each other. Naomi was willing to let Ruth return to her family. Ruth was willing to leave her homeland to go to Israel. Naomi helped arrange Ruth's marriage to Boaz, and Ruth helped replace Naomi's bitterness with the joy of being a grandmother. God was at the center of their intimate communication. Ruth came to know the God of Israel through Naomi. Let's put that in our notes. Something nice to. Okay, so I did it. Ruth came to know the God of Israel through Naomi. Ruth came to know the God of Israel. Spell that right? Yeah, through Naomi. Okay. The older women allowed Ruth to see her. Excuse me. The older woman allowed Ruth to see, hear, and feel all the joy and anguish of her relationship with God. How often do you feel that your thoughts and questions about God should be left out of a close relationship? How often do you share your unedited thoughts about God with your spouse or friends? Sharing openly about our relationship with God can bring depth and intimacy to our relationship with others. So I'm going to read that again, some questions for you to think about. How often do you feel that your thoughts and questions about God should be left out of close relationships? How often do you share your unedited thoughts about God with your spouse or friends? Sharing openly about our relationship with God can bring depth and intimacy to our relationships with others. And I'm saying depth. Depth. Sharing openly about our relationship with God can bring depth and intimacy to our relationships with others. Strength and accomplishments. Sorry. Strength and accomplishments. A relationship where the greatest bond was faith in God. So we're talking about Ruth and Naomi. I know you know that, but these are strengths and accomplishments between Ruth and Naomi's relationship, is what it sounds like. Notable facts about Ruth and Naomi's relationship. Lessons from the lives of Ruth and Naomi relationship. Vital statistics surrounding Ruth and Naomi's relationships. And then, yeah. So strengths and accomplishments. It was a relationship where the greatest bond was faith in God. It was a relationship of strong mutual commitment. Ruth and Naomi's relationship was one in which each person tried to do what was best for each other, not themselves, but each other. A notable fact about Ruth and Naomi's relationship: the family connected to the lineage of Jesus Christ. Lessons from their lives. God's living presence in a relationship overcomes differences that might otherwise create division and disharmony. I want to put that in my notes. God's living presence, in a relationship. Relationship. God's living presence in a relationship overcomes many differences. Okay. that may usually cause division and disharmony. All right, so some statistics about you know, Ruth, the situation where they live, things like that. Where it took place in Moab and Bethlehem, the occupations of them, wives and widows. So Ruth is from Moab, Naomi is from Bethlehem. They both were wives and they both became widows. Relatives. Oh, here we go. Naomi's husband, Elimelech. Naomi's sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Naomi's other daughter-in-law was Orpah. Ruth's second husband ends up being Boaz. And then Ruth ends up having a son named Obed. We're not there yet, but a key verse that they have brought to our attention will be, but Ruth replied, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. And that's Ruth chapter 1, verses 16 through 17. Okay. And I think that's a good key verse because that's where I started off when I was starting into chapter 2 today. And I remember the last video, I liked that verse. That verse was, important to me. Okay, so amazing. We're done with chapter 2 today. Keep yourself, connected. So therefore you can be available later at the live, whenever, when we go through chapter 3. Remember, if you have any comments, you have anything to say, have any questions that you're inquiring about, this specific chapter, definitely drop them down in the comments below. I would love to see what you have to say. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel, support the cause, and I hope you enjoyed today's Bible study. Thank you.